Mercusys AC10 as an access point with Windows DHCP server. So in this video, configure Mercusys AC10 as an access point with Windows DHCP server. We will fulfill the following configuration tasks at hand. We will assume that the Mercusys AC10 was initially configured and is running in router mode. So first, we will change the Mercusys AC10 operation mode into access point. Next, we will check if by changing into access point mode, the DHCP server is still enabled. We will make sure our Mercusys AC10 will not be a DHCP server. Then we will install and configure DHCP server role in our test Windows Server virtual machine. And finally, let's have some sample wireless client. Check if it's able to connect to the Wi-Fi and acquire IP address. Few more things to take note. In our topology here, we will assume that the router is properly configured, and we will also follow the IP address assignment for our AP and server. So here in our demonstration, so on your right, you will have the network topology. So the router here is assumed to be configured, and the LAN facing IP address is 192.168.100.1/24. Our Mercusys AC10 will act as an access point, and as you can see, is currently powered up already, but the operation mode is in router mode. If you haven't watched our video on how to initially configure or do a quick setup for our Mercusys AC10, I'm inviting you to watch that particular video tutorial. Okay, so let us do the first task, which is to change the operation mode of our Mercusys AC10 from router mode into an access point mode. If you scroll below, just for your information, there is another mode which is a range extender mode. Let's go ahead and change or select the access point mode. So you can go to advanced operation mode, select which mode you want. In our case, it's access point mode. You read the description of this particular mode, and let's click save. And you want to confirm if you really want to do or change this mode from router mode or to any mode to this access point mode, which we want to. So click reboot, and it will perform a reboot of the device. So our Mercusys AC10 has rebooted, and I've logged in. And you might wonder, it has an IP address of 192.168.100.200 from the change of operation mode from router mode to access point mode. Remember, the IP a while ago was 192.168.1.1, and we changed the operation mode straight away. And once it reboots, how did I know that I have a 192.168.100.200? Actually, I have set up this router to be a temporary DHCP server since we haven't configured yet our Windows DHCP server. Temporary as a DHCP server, and I've taken a look at the leases or the DHCP setup for this router and found out that our access point now, which is our Mercusys AC10, acquired an IP of 192.168.100.200. So after the login page, it will ask you to personalize your wireless settings. So currently it is on its default Mercusys SSID, and our SSID will be Inquirinity. So we'll change this one to Inquirinity, and perhaps again we have to remove the numbers. So I'm okay with this SSID. I'm okay with this 5 GHz SSID. I'll change the password again to a much simpler one because this is just for demonstration purposes. If you don't want to change or personalize your wireless settings, you can actually click this one to skip this quick setup. But since we are here and the opportunity to change the SSID, so might as well we take and change the personalized or wireless settings for this Mercusys AC10, which is now in access point mode. So let's click save. So let's confirm our settings. So click next and it will run through and apply the settings. So congratulations, you have set up the network or the access point correctly as it says, but we will have to verify later when we click finish. Let's click finish and we are now at the Mercusys AC10 page. So let's verify. Let's go to system and the operation mode is still on our access point mode. It's not in router mode already. And if we go to internet and our LAN, which is on dynamic IP, so it acquires an IP 192.168.100.200 again for this router. So for now, we will configure static IP to match the required IP address assignment based from our topology. So let us edit the IP address to match the IP address assignment of our access point. So it should be 192.168.100.10 instead of 200. So we should edit this to make it 192.168.100.10. It's /24 or in this particular subnet mask 255.255.255.0. The default gateway will be the IP address of our router, which is correctly indicated here, 192.168.100.1, so we don't have any change. So let's save the changes that we want to make on our LAN interface for this access point. So after changing our LAN IP address, which is already applied, as you can see here, is to make sure that this access point is not the DHCP server or the DHCP server functionality is disabled. So again, we would want our Windows to be our DHCP server. So we don't want this particular functionality on our Mercusys AC10. And in order to do that, let's go to DHCP server just below our LAN. And there is a uncheck here on the enable or beside the enabled, and it will remove or turn off the DHCP server functionality in our Mercusys AC10. So nothing much, nothing fancy. So let's click save after we uncheck to apply what we want on our Mercusys AC10. Let's have a quick check on our Mercusys AC10 before we move on to our Windows DHCP server. So under our system, the operation mode is access point mode. On our IP address, it's 192.168.100.10 static IP. Our wireless is configured to be Inquirinity or with the SSID Inquirinity. After that, our DHCP server, we ensure that it is disabled. So we have boot up our Windows server that we will install and configure a DHCP server role. But first, I would like to show you that the IP address is already configured, 192.168.100.5, and the other corresponding parameters such as subnet mask, default gateway are also configured. Okay, so server manager is opened or launched, and we click add roles from the dashboard, add roles and features, and we click next. We click next again, and this is the server name, server.inq.edo. So click next, and we will find the DHCP server role and add the corresponding features, which is the DHCP server tools under the remote server administration tools. So add features and click next, and any required features were added. Next, click next and install. You have the option also to restart your server or this server after the installation. So we will just go ahead and click install, and we will resume once the installation is finished. So the installation of the DHCP server role is done. All we need to do is to complete the DHCP server configuration. So from here, we will select the complete DHCP configuration, or we could also do it here. But since we have this clickable, so let's go ahead and click the complete DHCP configuration. So the window DHCP post install configuration wizard will appear, and click next. So specify the credentials to be used to authorize this DHCP server in the Active Directory domain services. So we don't have any ADDS, so skip AD authorization, click commit and click OK. So the status of the post install configuration is done. So click close, and let's click close and refresh this server manager. So take a look at the notifications. So configuration succeeded of adding the roles, and configuration completed for the DHCP server at server. So the server name of this particular Windows server is server. So we have now the DHCP role here, and we could continue and create a DHCP scope. So we right click on this server. So DHCP server, right click and select DHCP manager. So the DHCP manager window will open. Let's expand this one. So server, and we have IPv4 and IPv6. So our concern will be on IPv4, and we will add our scope. So let's add a scope. To add a new scope, on the action menu, click the new scope. So action and new scope, click next, and the name of the scope, for example, our LAN, and description is also LAN, and you could have your own name or custom name and custom description based on your requirements. But for our sample demonstration, so we have our scope name as LAN, description as LAN as well. So the IP address range, so let's try to have a different one, 100.50 and 192.168.100.99. So the subnet mask will be /24 or 255.255.255.0. So we're okay with the list or the range of addresses to distribute. So click next. So any exclusion will be added here. So for simplicity, we will not add any exclusion and delay setting. So let's click next. For days or the least duration, days, hours, minutes, so we could perhaps shorten this one. Of course, this is a sample only. You could change whatever least duration based on your requirement. So for us, it's an hour. So click next. Configure DHCP options. So yes, we would like to configure DHCP options. Next. So one of the important DHCP option is to add the router. So our router is 192.168.100.1. Click add. Click next. So we don't have any domain name. So we have some parent domain name, so that is okay. So however, we don't have really an Active Directory domain services for this server. So let's just be okay with the public DNS, as this is a sample Windows DHCP server only. So click next. So any Win servers we don't have, click next. Activate the scope. Yes, we would like to activate the scope. Click next and click finish to complete the new scope addition. So let's review. So we have one scope, and if we want to make some changes, we could right click properties and change the scope name, start IP address, and other parameters. So drop down and expand the address pool or view the address pool. So this is from 50 to 99. Leases, we don't have any list IP address to a certain client. And we have some other options here, reservation policies. So for scope options, we could change when our router IP address is changed, and if we could have a different DNS server or different DNS domain name in our network. But for now, let's leave it as it is, as this is our sample topology. So what's important is we have our scope configured. Let's double check from our Windows DHCP server if indeed it reflects on the address leases. So let's click on the scope, and under it is address leases. So right click, refresh, and yes, we have a client IP address which is 192.168.100.50. So in this video, configure Mercusys AC10 as an access point with Windows DHCP server. We are able to fulfill the required configuration tasks. For our Mercusys AC10, we are able to change the operation mode into access point mode, change the IP address into static, and disable DHCP server, and personalize 2.4 and 5 GHz wireless settings. For our Windows DHCP server, we are able to install DHCP server role and required features, and we are able to create new DHCP scope. Then we have tested that we are able to connect to our Wi-Fi, acquire IP address from the Windows DHCP server, and connect to the internet. Hoping you find this video helpful and useful, and as always, thank you for viewing.